When someone
None of the
mentions
most amazing
weapons in the
weapons in
Demon
Demon
Slayer
Slayer?
context, one
Right.
tends to think of the standard Nichirin sword, but there are many other types of weapons out there, even among the Hashiras. So, here are some of the weapons in Demon Slayer that go outside the norm. Inosuke's dual swords. Inosuke is one of the 2 dual wielders we see in the anime, but his swords weren't supposed to be chipped like that. We
Tengen
see
being
it
the
at the end of
second.
Season 1, when Haganezka and Kanamori bring Tanjiro and Inosuke's new swords.
He just
His
beats
dual
them out.
swords looked like any other standard Nichirin sword, until Inosuke grabbed a rock and started chipping them, making Kanamori, his swordsmith, go crazy. Doing this
I mean, it kind of adds like more attack to it. You know what I'm saying? Like it's more dangerous.
research, I realized that one could hardly separate the sword from its wielder. Something you will repeatedly see in the characters I'll talk about later in this video. As Exhibit A, Inosuke chips his swords because this way he can tear and rip demons' flesh instead of just slicing through, making them fit perfectly with his breathing style. He
Yeah,
basically
true.
does it for the extra damage. He
Yeah,
says that
basically.
getting cut by one of his swords
He's just a
feels like
beast.
being sliced by 1,000 blades. It is almost poetic that he modifies his weaponry to be more wildlike and makes them
Yeah.
go along with his breathing style based on wildlife.
It does
Specifically
fit him.
wolves, boars, and bears. Another singularity of his swords is their lack of cord wrap around the guard.
Yeah, I was gonna
Again,
say.
they originally came with it, but Inosuke got rid of them and put on some bandages instead. Shinobu's Stinger Nichirin Katana. As we would expect, the insect Hashira
Stinger
has a
blade.
perfectly forged blade for her abilities and breathing style. Shinobu has this very unique sword, made basically to sting her enemies with poison, just like an insect would do. It's very impressive that the tsuka of her sword was modified to use it as a portable poison mixer and loader. Most of you probably already assumed this, but for those still wondering, no.
that's a cool
The
replica.
middle of her sword is not sharp. It was replaced by a rod. This is basically because she doesn't kill demons by cutting their heads off,
She can
as
just
most
stab
demon
them.
slayers do, but by injecting them with enough wisteria poison to kill them. It is said that she doesn't
That could have like pluses and minuses, right? Because if she gets into like a fight, sword fight, she can only block. She can't like slice. She can only stab. But I mean, hey.
have the physical strength to do it the traditional way. So it makes sense that her weapon is designed to enhance her specific abilities. Despite not being so physically strong, she can outspeed the drop ripple thrust, the fastest thrusting technique in water breathing. It's pretty impressive that she found a way to compensate for her lack of strength and master it to the point of becoming a pillar. Tengen's dual Nichirin cleavers. We've
Yeah.
seen how absurdly skilled
Sick.
Tengen is with his cleavers. Thankfully, they are connected by a chain so that he could use it even after losing his left hand. He is so skillful and fast with his primary weapon that Daki didn't even realize when he cut her head off. Tengen's cleavers don't have anything to envy to the standard Nichirin sword size. They were
That looks
created
so cool, man.
specifically for sound breathing. It is said that they can cut as fast as sound, and that no demon had survived a blow of them before Daki and Gyutaro. These aesthetically beautiful cleavers go perfectly with Tengen's flamboyant, attention-seeking personality. Since Tengen's
Flashiness.
cleavers are
Okay,
huge,
flashiness.
he doesn't use sheaths, but instead wraps them with cloth and carries them on his back. I think it's worth mentioning that he also has these explosive beads that he uses in the Entertainment
Explosive
District
balls.
arc. They explode with friction and are also capable of harming demons. He also carries around dozens of kunai,
Nice.
probably because of his shinobi or ninja upbringing, just like those that Hinatsuru fired toward Gyutaro while fighting with Tengen and Tanjiro. Mitsuri's Whip Nichirin Katana. Now let's talk about Mitsuri's whip-like katana, made by the one and only Techin Techikawahara, the chief of
man.
the swordsmith village. I mean, of course, they wouldn't let an apprentice do the job of creating this one-of-a-kind sword in Kimetsu no Yaiba's universe. Thanks to its structure and the abilities required to use it, Mitsuri is the only one capable of using it. You would need her
The love
superhuman
Hashira.
strength and flexibility for both her breathing style and being able to wield her weapons without self-injury. This sword is so flexible and long that Mitsuri has to fold it to put it in the sword sheath. Her attacks with her sword can even be faster than Tengen's. Yes,
Oh,
the
damn.
one I just said was as fast as sound. It is also an excellent weapon for long-distance fights, which can be a good advantage. It could even keep you safe from most demons, since they usually go for more close combat. Did you know that there is
Oh,
a very
man.
similar sword in real life? It is called the Urumi, and originated in South India. Just like Mitsuri's Nichirin sword, the Urumi is treated as a steel whip, and is one of the last taught in Indian martial arts because of how
Nice.
difficult it is to wield.
I actually didn't know
It
this.
seems that it is so old that it probably
Looks
is
like a
from between 600 BCE
a little bit of a
and
whip, but
300
modified.
BCE. Obanai's Twisted Nichiren Katana. A serpent-breathing demon slayer must have a serpent-shaped sword. At first, I wasn't quite sure what advantages this shape could give Obanai when battling, but it makes total sense when you consider his breathing technique. This type of sword is excellent for surprise attacks and makes it almost impossible to track while defending oneself from it. Of course, the sword doesn't have a common sheath. It would be difficult for anyone to sheathe and unsheath that sword in the traditional way.
You
You'd be
could
dead
not.
before drawing it. So, Gantetsu, Obanai's swordsmith, also the son of Techin Techikawahara, created a special sheath along with the sword. This sheath is made of leather with a weak magnetic pull, so it works like it wrapped the sword. Obanai's sword looks similar to the Indonesian kris sword, and it is commonly used in the Silat martial art form of this country.
I love that there's actually like real world inspirations for these swords. You know, like the one from India and like this one from Indonesia. That's cool. I really
Silat
like
martial
that.
art form of this country.
I didn't
It
know
was a
these.
sword handed through generations and worn at special ceremonies. Even though his sword, and even himself as a person, are a little odd, Obanai is one of the most skilled swordsmen in the entire Demon Slayer Corps. So much so that he was entrusted to teach Demon Slayers about sword wielding techniques. He used techniques that bent his sword to make unpredictable attacks, even if he was wielding a standard wooden sword. Gyomei's Nichiren spiked flail and axe. Gyomei's
Probably
weapon
one of the
doesn't even
most
try to
creative.
resemble a sword. He uses a huge spike ball attached to a chain with an axe at the other end of it. But of course, it was forged with the same materials as the Nichiren swords. If not, they wouldn't be effective against demons. Its chain, and therefore the whole weapon, are basically indestructible. There couldn't be a better weapon for the Stone Hashira. He is
True.
blind, so he can't locate his target by sight. Instead, he understands the space around him, thankfully to the echo of the sound of his chains. I think even Zenitsu would be amazed by this ability. Gyomei's spiked flail and axe resemble a Kusarigama. Therefore, his fighting style is very similar to
Ah.
the Kusarigama Jutsu, though this Japanese weapon comes with a kama, or sickle, and a heavy iron weight at the end instead of the flail and axe. You can definitely see
Actually
the
looks
resemblance.
very
Gyutaro's
similar, yeah.
blood sickles. I wanted Gyutaro's sickles to make a special appearance because, at the end of the day, this is a video about weapons, not just Nichiren weapons. Plus, they gave a lot of trouble to our heroes to defeat him. So let's talk a little about them. Unsurprisingly, his sickles are fashioned with his own flesh and blood. They are incredibly
that's very
sharp and
messed up.
durable. They can easily block Nichiren's sword attacks. Gyutaro, in his human past life, also had a sickle that he brought with him everywhere. And I find it interesting that they are his primary weapon as a demon, too. Gyutaro has impressive control over his blood, even on the outside of his body. That's how he controls the blood sickles he uses in his blood demon art. And the same is true with his main sickles. He can move them telekinetically, making them a long-distance threat, too. Of course, there are some others that I would love to talk about in this video.
There's a lot
but
of good ones.
I promised myself that the video would be as spoiler-free as possible. So, I guess we'll add them to this list in the future.